Chapter 4 The Road to Elxus. Jace was giving Phil a pep talk before he set out for Elxus, his leather backpack filled to the brim with his longbow, arrows, and various other supplies the group would need along the way, like food and clothing. And if you see Alex the elf, tell her Jace was cut off by Sharon. That'll be enough now, Jace. We don't need you putting any more ideas into the boy's head. Fine, Sharon, Jace says with a half smile, shrugging his sun-emboldened sword and shield onto his back and heading back towards his modest shack next to Phil's. All right, let's hit the road, Robert says, hoisting his tan backpack onto the wagon. The wagon was being pulled by none other than our faithful Pole and Sharon's brown broodmare. Both horses looked ready to go, giving their furry heads several tosses, neighing, and stomping the dirt. The four travelers hopped in the wagon. Bron took the reins, gave them a quick snap and a "Yah!" and they were off. The wagon pulled by the gray-brown horses made amazing progress north. They stopped occasionally to get water from the river for the horses and themselves, but other than that, they encountered little trouble as Robert and Phil were both excellent hunters, taking down small game like rabbits along the way, keeping the group very well fed. They took breaks throughout the week-long trip to the Forest Kingdom, setting up camp, which entailed making a fire, Sharon gathered the wood, and cooking the game Robert and Phil managed to take down. Bron took care of the cooking. Before they knew it, the foursome was noticing the path becoming smaller and smaller, the air temperature dropping a few degrees, and the trees that lined the road becoming taller and thicker around the middle. Won't be far now, Robert says, giving the ropes a quick snap, the horses responding with neighs and neigh, and they picked up their pace to a canter. Robert is pushing the horses too hard, Bron thought to himself for a moment, a little irritated with the new elf. The moment passed, though, and he settled back in. Chapter 5 Matrain. The group of four was coming up on a beautiful wooden gate, adorned with flowers of blue, red, and yellow. As they passed through the gate, they gave the guardsman working the gate a tip of 2 gold lags, which he responded with a curt nod, then went back to watching the gate. These days, King Danfon's men were known to come even as far north as Elxus, and elves were known to take no chances, especially when it came to the security of elfkind. The kingdom of Elxus was beautiful, the prize of Underaf. It was the oldest, the prize of Elxus, or the prize of Underaf. It was the oldest kingdom by far, and the elves were not afraid to let you know this fact. Pole and the broodmare trotted peacefully through the market stalls. Phil looked around peacefully too. This city was full of greenery, something he had known little of in Underaf. As he looked around, he made eye contact with the pretty elven maiden. His face turned a bright shade of red, and he quickly looked away back to the occupants of the wagon. The travelers soon reached their destination, as they were in the capital city of the Elf Kingdom, called Justice. The Capitol building was located directly in the center. It was a magnificent building, older than time. The structure was made of a material unavailable to the New World, and it showed. The two human beings were blown away at the sight of it. By the 5, Bron says, his eyes widening in astonishment. Your 5 are babes in the eyes of the old gods, Ron, Robert replies, giving the reins another flick, sending the 2 weary horses towards the modest stable next to the Capitol. The group of 4 walk up to the door of the Capitol building. Robert knocked politely, using the wolf-shaped door pommel, and waited politely for the Capitol attendant to come to the door. A large oak door opened a crack, and a nasally voice could be heard. State your business, Bron says. The voice said. Bron replies, We're tamers, here with our apprentice. And what is it exactly that a tamer does? The nasally voice asked. They tame dragons, sir, Phil pipes up. We'll find that. Come in. We'll find it. Come in, the nasally voice says. The door opens, revealing a well-dressed elf man, slightly shorter than Robert. They walked into the Capitol, looking around at the ridiculous wooden dragon statues surrounding the inside of the Capitol. The polished wooden floors reflect the group of five's reflections perfectly. They approached the throne of the Elf King. He had a long gray beard down to his mid-chest, and a balding head, like the Grand Maester. That was where the similarities ended, though. The elderly elf man was extremely handsome. Welcome to the Justice Capital City of the Kingdom of Alxis. My name is Matrain, and I am King of the Elves, Matrain says to the gathered group, his attendant taking his place at his right side. Braun leads with saying, It's a pleasure to meet you, King Matrain. I go by Braun the Destroyer. We're here to discuss an issue pertaining to Underef. King Danfon has grown bolder and bolder in his attacks on the resistance movement. Not only that, we now have back at Outpost 3 dragonlings. One is already the size of a cow by now. We're here to inform you of our situation and humbly ask for the elves' assistance in taking down King Danfon once and for all. The words hung in the air for a moment. King Matrain was shocked by the news of dragons, and his eyebrows raised a few inches on his face. Dragons in Underef? Astonishing. Braun, was it? You say you need the elves' help. We're stretched thin as it is. How many elves would be needed? King Matrain says, taking a seat in his throne again. Not too much, King Matrain. I would say 5 elves plus Robert and Sharon would be plenty, Braun says, the king's expression softening to one of understanding. Fine. Given, please show our guests to their room for the night. Really, sire, Given says, ushering the group of 4 out of the throne room and into the hallway, leading them down to the end where 4 doors await. This is where thou shalt stay while you're here, Given says matter-of-factly. I've never had my own room before, Phil says in amazement, rubbing his long bow absent-mindedly, much to the amusement of Sharon, who was very used to this kind of elvish lavishry. Elven lavishry. Go with that. If thou shalt require more assistance, you will find the king and I in the throne. If thou shalt require more assistance, you will find the king and I in the throne room. And without further ado, Given made his way back down the hallway towards the throne room in King Matrain. Before the foursome went to bed that night, the group made a visit to the elf cemetery behind the Capitol building and paid their respects, to Robert's father, who had passed away the very same day 14 years ago. The next morning, the group awoke to their stomachs rumbling. So they headed to the incredible Capitol dining room and feasted on fresh caught fish, seared venison, and an assortment of vegetables from the local fields. After breakfast, Phil, Sharon, Robert, and Braun all went back to the throne room to convene with King Matrain. King Matrain, honored to see you again today. Your rooms are as elegant as can be, Braun says respectively. The 2 elves and 2 humans stood around the Elf King's throne, wondering where the Elf King would go next. I've thought on your proposal last night, and I have agreed to include 5 elven archers for your cause, Elf King Matrain says to the gathered 4. We're most gracious, King Matrain. We're most gracious, King Matrain, Phil replies kindly, already having learned a lot about elf culture in his short trip to the to Justice. The Elf King looked upon the gathered crew fondly, already feeling some more towards them, even though they had only known each other for a short time. Realistically, the crew needed to return to Underaf and Outpost soon. Their dragons would be missing them sorely, and they had never been by themselves for so long. Not to mention the Grand Maester would be missing them too, and surely had his hands more than full raising 3 whole dragons all by himself. Suddenly, 3 male elves and 2 female elves entered the throne room, their long bows strapped to their backs in the traditional fashion of elven culture. They wore emerald green leather and golden necklaces around their neck. You're too kind. You're too kind, Father, Sharon piped up at the moment, much to the surprise of her human compatriots, as they had no idea King Matrain was Sharon's father. Father? Bronn exclaims, a shocked look breaking his usual cool demeanor. Yes, Sharon. Yes, Sharon is my only daughter, and heir to the entire kingdom of Elxis. So said King Matrain, with a glimmer of white light in his bright blue eyes. Chapter 6, Outpost. The new group set off that day, back to the kingdom of Unrath, feeling better about their chances of defeating King Danfon and his mighty white dragon, Grey Winter. They were now accompanied by the 5 archer elves King Matrain had assigned for them, and they rode beige horses alongside the wagon being pulled by Pole and the brown broodmare. Suddenly, a barrage of arrows rained down on the Ninesome from above as they made their way south. The archers were quick to respond, stringing their bows with arrows and scanning the tree lines fervently for the source. King Danfon's men are here. Elves, positions now, Robert yells to his peers, the iron-spiked helmets of their enemies gleaming in the sunlight behind the trees. Suddenly, spears erupted from the tree line, and a line of 10 Danfon men erupted from the forest, sprinting at full speed, screaming at the top of their lungs, For Danfon! Arrows flew from the elf's bow, cutting through them like a hot knife through butter. 6 remained, and they slowed as they noticed their companions being mowed down. Bronn, Sharon says, and Bronn knew what she meant. They joined hands, and a beam of red and green light erupted from their chests, mowing the rest of the men down. The group of 9 breathed a sigh of relief. They were safe, for now. If they wanted to remain that way, they had to keep moving. Outpost was not too much further down the road, south now. On the way, they stopped at an Shrika church for some quiet reflection on the battle that had been fought. Sharon even shed a few tears at the thought of the lost life, and Bronn looked a little shakier than he used to be, than they were all used to. After paying their respects, the group of 9 followed the road south down a bit further, finally reaching Outpost and began settling down once again in the Underrath settlement.